Now reading A Room with a View by E.M. Edward Morgan Forster, a public domain text. Chapter 11. In Mrs. Vyse's well-appointed flat, the comic muse, though able to look after her own interests, did not disdain the assistance of Mr. Vyse. His idea of bringing the Emersons to Windy Corner struck her as decidedly good, and she carried through the negotiations without a hitch. Sir Harry Otway signed the agreement, met Mr. Emerson, who was duly disillusioned. The Miss Allens were duly offended, and wrote a dignified letter to Lucy, whom they held responsible for the failure. Mr. Beebe planned pleasant moments for the newcomers, and told Mrs. Honeychurch that Freddie must call on them as soon as they arrived. Indeed, so ample was the muse's equipment that she permitted Mr. Harris, never a very robust criminal, to droop his head, to be forgotten, and to die. Lucy, to descend from bright heaven to earth, whereon there are shadows because there are hills. Lucy was at first plunged into despair, but settled after a little thought that it did not matter the very least. Now that she was engaged, the Emersons would scarcely insult her, and were welcome into the neighbourhood. And Cecil was welcome to bring whom he would into the neighbourhood. Therefore Cecil was welcome to bring the Emersons into the neighbourhood. But as I say, this took a little thinking, and, so illogical are girls, the event remained rather greater and rather more dreadful than it should have done. She was glad that a visit to Mrs. Vyse now fell due. The tenants moved into Cissy Villa while she was safe in the London flat. Cecil, darling," she whispered the evening she arrived, and crept into his arms. Cecil too became demonstrative. He saw that the needful fire had been kindled in Lucy. At last she longed for attention, as a woman should, and looked up to him because he was a man. "So you do love me, little thing," he murmured. "Oh, Cecil, I do. I don't know what I should do without you." Several days passed. Then she had a letter from Miss Bartlett. A coolness had sprung up between the two cousins, and they had not corresponded since they parted in August. The coolness dated from what Charlotte would call the flight to Rome, and in Rome it had increased amazingly. For the companion who is merely uncongenial in the medieval world becomes exasperating in the classical. Charlotte, unselfish in the forum, would have tried a sweeter temper than Lucy's, and once, in the baths of Caracalla, they had doubted whether they could continue their tour. Lucy had said she would join the Vyses. Mrs. Vyse was an acquaintance of her mother, so there was no impropriety in the plan, and Miss Bartlett had replied that she was quite used to being abandoned suddenly. Finally nothing happened, but the coolness remained, and, for Lucy, was even increased when she opened the letter and read as follows. It had been forwarded from Windy Corner. Tunbridge Wells, September. Dearest Lucia, I have news of you at last. Miss Lavish has been bicycling in your parts, but was not sure whether a call would be welcome. Puncturing her tyre near Summer Street, and it being mended while she sat very woebegone in that pretty churchyard, she saw to her astonishment a door open opposite and the younger Emerson man come out. He said his father had just taken the house. He said he did not know that you lived in the neighbourhood. He never suggested giving Eleanor a cup of tea. Dear Lucy, I am much worried, and I advise you to make a clean breast of his past behaviour to your mother, Freddie, and Mr. Vyse, who will forbid him to enter the house, and so on. That was a great misfortune, and I dare say you have told them already. Mr. Vyse is so sensitive. I remember how I used to get on his nerves at Rome. I am very sorry about it all, and should not feel easy unless I warned you. Believe me, your anxious and loving cousin, Charlotte. Lucy was much annoyed, and replied as follows: Beauchamp Mansions, S.W. Dear Charlotte, many thanks for your warning. When Mr. Emerson forgot himself on the mountain, you made me promise not to tell Mother, because you said she would blame you for not being always with me. I have kept that promise, and cannot possibly tell her now. I have said both to her and Cecil that I met the Emersons at Florence, and that they are respectable people, which I do think, and the reason that he offered Miss Lavish no tea was probably that he had none himself. She should have tried at the rectory. I cannot begin making a fuss at this stage. You must see that it would be too absurd. If the Emersons heard I had complained of them, they would think themselves of importance, which is exactly what they are not. I like the old father, and look forward to seeing him again. As for the son, I am sorry for him when we meet, rather than for myself. They are known to Cecil, who is very well and spoke of you the other day. We expect to be married in January. Miss Lavish cannot have told you much about me, for I am not at Windy Corner at all, but here. Please do not put private outside your envelope again. No one opens my letters. Yours affectionately, L.M. Honeychurch. Secrecy has this disadvantage: we lose the sense of proportion. We cannot tell whether our secret is important or not. Were Lucy and her cousin closeted with a great thing which would destroy Cecil's life if he discovered it, or with a little thing which he would laugh at? Miss Bartlett suggested the former. Perhaps she was right. It had become a great thing now. Left to herself, Lucy would have told her mother and her lover ingenuously, and it would have remained a little thing. Emerson, not Harris. It was only that a few weeks ago. She tried to tell Cecil even now when they were laughing about some beautiful lady who had smitten his heart at school. But her body behaved so ridiculously that she stopped. She and her secret stayed 10 days longer in the deserted metropolis, visiting the scenes they were to know so well later on. It did her no harm, Cecil thought, to learn the framework of society, while society itself was absent on the golf links or the moors. The weather was cool, and it did her no harm. In spite of the season, Mrs. Vyse managed to scrape together a dinner party consisting entirely of the grandchildren of famous people. The food was poor, but the talk had a witty weariness that impressed the girl. One was tired of everything, it seemed. One launched into enthusiasms only to collapse gracefully and pick oneself up amid sympathetic laughter. In this atmosphere, the pension Bettolini and Windy Corner appeared equally crude, and Lucy saw that her London career would estrange her a little from all that she had loved in the past. The grandchildren asked her to play the piano. She played Schumann. Now some Beethoven, called Cecil, when the querulous beauty of the music had died. She shook her head and played Schumann again. The melody rose, unprofitably magical. It broke. It was resumed broken, not marching once from the cradle to the grave. The sadness of the incomplete, the sadness that is often life, but should never be art, throbbed in its disjected phrases and made the nerves of the audience throb. Not thus had she played on the little draped piano at the Bettolini, and too much Schumann was not the remark that Mr. Beebe had passed to himself when she returned. When the guests were gone, and Lucy had gone to bed, Mrs. Vyse paced up and down the drawing-room, discussing her little party with her son. Mrs. Vyse was a nice woman, but her personality, like many another's, had been swamped by London, for it needs a strong head to live among many people. The too vast orb of her fate had crushed her, and she had seen too many seasons, too many cities, too many men, for her abilities, and even with Cecil she was mechanical, and behaved as if he was not one son, but, so to speak, a filial crowd. "Make Lucy one of us," she said, looking round intelligently at the end of each sentence, and straining her lips apart until she spoke again. "Lucy is becoming wonderful, wonderful." Her music always was wonderful. Yes, but she is purging off the Honeychurch taint, most excellent Honeychurches, but you know what I mean. She is not always quoting servants, or asking one how the pudding is made. Italy has done it. "Perhaps," she murmured, thinking of the museum that represented Italy to her. "It is just possible. Cecil, mind you marry her next January. She is one of us already." "But her music," he exclaimed. "The style of her." How she kept to Schumann when, like an idiot, I wanted Beethoven. Schumann was right for this evening. Schumann was the thing. "Do you know, Mother, I shall have our children educated just like Lucy. Bring them up among honest country folks for freshness, send them to Italy for subtlety, and then, not till then, let them come to London. I don't believe in these London educations," he broke off, remembering that he had had one himself, and concluded, "at all events, not for women." "Make her one of us," repeated Mrs. Vyse, and processed to bed. As she was dozing off, a cry, the cry of nightmare, rang from Lucy's room. Lucy could ring for the maid if she liked, but Mrs. Vyse thought it kind to go herself. She found the girl sitting upright with her hand on her cheek. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Vyse. It is these dreams. Bad dreams, just dreams." The elder lady smiled and kissed her, saying very distinctly, "You should have heard us talking about you, dear. He admires you more than ever. Dream of that." Lucy returned the kiss, still covering one cheek with her hand. Mrs. Vyse recessed to bed. Cecil, whom the cry had not awoke, snored. Darkness enveloped the flat. Chapter 12. 12th chapter. It was a Saturday afternoon, gay and brilliant after abundant rains, and the spirit of youth dwelt in it, though the season was now autumn. All that was gracious triumphed. As the motor cars passed through Summer Street, they raised only a little dust, and their stench was soon dispersed by the wind and replaced by the scent of the wet birches or of the pines. Mr. Beebe, at leisure for life's amenities, leant over his rectory gate. Freddie leant by him, smoking a pendant pipe. "Suppose we go and hinder those new people opposite for a little? They might amuse you." Freddie, whom his fellow creatures never amused, suggested that the new people might be feeling a bit busy, and so on, since they had only just moved in. "I suggested we should hinder them," said Mr. Beebe. "They are worth it." Unlatching the gate, he sauntered over the triangular green to Sissy Villa. "Hullo," he cried, shouting in at the open door, through which much squalor was visible. A grave voice replied, "Hullo, I've brought someone to see you. I'll be down in a minute." The passage was blocked by a wardrobe, which the removal men had failed to carry up the stairs. Mr. Beebe edged round it with difficulty. The sitting-room itself was blocked with books. "Are these people great readers?" Freddie whispered. "Are they that sort? I fancy they know how to read, a rare accomplishment. What have they got? Byron?" "Exactly. A Shropshire lad. Never heard of it. The Way of All Flesh. Never heard of it. Gibbon. Hullo. Dear George reads German. Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and so we go on. Well, I suppose your generation knows its own business, Honeychurch." "Mr. Beebe, look at that," said Freddie in awestruck tones. In the cornice of the wardrobe, the hand of an amateur had painted this inscription: "Mistrust all enterprises that require new clothes." "I know, isn't it jolly? I like that. I'm certain that's the old man's doing." "How very odd of him. Surely you agree." But Freddie was his mother's son, and felt that one ought not to go on spoiling the furniture. "Pictures," the clergyman continued, scrambling about the room. "Giotto, they got that at Florence, I'll be bound." "The same as Lucy's got." "Oh, did Miss Honeychurch enjoy London?" "She came back yesterday. I suppose she had a good time?" "Yes, very," said Freddie, taking up a book. "She and Cecil are thicker than ever. That's good hearing." "I wish I wasn't such a fool, Mr. Beebe." Mr. Beebe ignored the remark. "Lucy used to be nearly as stupid as I am, but it'll be very different now, Mother thinks. She will read all kinds of books. So will you. Only medical books. Not books that you can talk about afterwards. Cecil is teaching Lucy Italian, and he says her playing is wonderful. There are all kinds of things in it that we have never noticed. Cecil says, 'What on earth are those people doing upstairs?' 'Emerson. We think we'll come another time.'" George ran downstairs and pushed them into the room without speaking. "Let me introduce Mr. Honeychurch, a neighbour." Then Freddie hurled one of the thunderbolts of youth. Perhaps he was shy, perhaps he was friendly, or perhaps he thought that George's face wanted washing. At all events, he greeted him with, "Howdy do? Come and have a bathe." "Oh, all right," said George, impassive. Mr. Beebe was highly entertained. "Howdy do? Howdy do? Come and have a bathe," he chuckled. "That's the best conversational opening I've ever heard, but I'm afraid it will only act between men. Can you picture a lady who has been introduced to another lady by a third lady, opening civilities with, 'How do you do? Come and have a bathe,' and yet you will tell me that the sexes are equal?" "I tell you that they shall be," said Mr. Emerson, who had been slowly descending the stairs. "Good afternoon, Mr. Beebe. I tell you they shall be comrades, and George thinks the same." "We are to raise ladies to our level?" the clergyman inquired. "The Garden of Eden," pursued Mr. Emerson, still descending, "which you place in the past, is really yet to come. We shall enter it when we no longer despise our bodies." Mr. Beebe disclaimed placing the Garden of Eden anywhere. "In this, not in other things, we men are ahead. We despise the body less than women do. But not until we are comrades shall we enter the garden. I say, what about this bathe? Murmured Freddie, appalled at the mass of philosophy that was approaching him. I believed in a return to nature once, but how can we return to nature when we have never been with her? Today, I believe that we must discover nature. After many conquests, we shall attain simplicity. It is our heritage. Let me introduce Mr. Honeychurch, whose sister you will remember at Florence. How do you do? Very glad to see you, and that you are taking George for a bathe. Very glad to hear that your sister is going to marry. Marriage is a duty. I am sure that she will be happy, for we know Mr. Vyse too. He has been most kind. He met us by chance in the National Gallery, and arranged everything about this delightful house. Though I hope I have not vexed Sir Harry Otway. I have met so few liberal landowners, and I was anxious to compare his attitude towards the game laws with the Conservative attitude. Ah, this wind! You do well to bathe. Yours is a glorious country, Honeychurch. Not a bit, mumbled Freddie. I must, that is to say, I have to have the pleasure of calling on you later on, my mother says, I hope. No, my lad, who taught us that drawing-room twaddle. Call on your grandmother. Listen to the wind among the pines. Yours is a glorious country. Mr. Beebe came to the rescue. Mr. Emerson, he will call, I shall call, you or your son will return our calls before 10 days have elapsed. I trust that you have realized about the 10 days interval. It does not count that I helped you with the stare eyes yesterday. It does not count that they are going to bathe this afternoon. Yes, go and bathe, George. Why do you dawdle talking? Bring them back to tea. Bring back some milk, cakes, honey. The change will do you good. George has been working very hard at his office. I can't believe he's well. George bowed his head, dusty and sombre, exhaling the peculiar smell of one who has handled furniture. Do you really want this bathe? Freddie asked him. It is only a pond, don't you know? I dare say you are used to something better. Yes, I have said yes already. Mr. Beebe felt bound to assist his young friend, and led the way out of the house and into the pine woods. How glorious it was! For a little time the voice of old Mr. Emerson pursued them, dispensing good wishes and philosophy. It ceased, and they only heard the fair wind blowing the bracken and the trees. Mr. Beebe, who could be silent, but who could not bear silence, was compelled to chatter, since the expedition looked like a failure, and neither of his companions would utter a word. He spoke of Florence. George attended gravely, assenting or dissenting with slight but determined gestures that were as inexplicable as the motions of the treetops above their heads. And what a coincidence that you should meet Mr. Vyse! Did you realize that you would find all the pension Bertolini down here? I did not, Miss Lavish told me. When I was a young man, I always meant to write a history of coincidence. No enthusiasm, though, as a matter of fact, coincidences are much rarer than we suppose. For example, it isn't purely coincidentally that you are here now, when one comes to reflect. To his relief, George began to talk. It is. I have reflected. It is fate. Everything is fate. We are flung together by fate, drawn apart by fate, flung together, drawn apart. The 12 winds blow us. We settle nothing. You have not reflected at all, rapped the clergyman. Let me give you a useful tip, Emerson. Attribute nothing to fate. Don't say, I didn't do this, for you did it 10 to 1. Now I'll cross-question you. Where did you first meet Miss Honeychurch and myself? Italy. And where did you meet Mr. Vyse, who is going to marry Miss Honeychurch? National Gallery. Looking at Italian art. There you are, and yet you talk of coincidence and fate. You naturally seek out things Italian, and so do we and our friends. This narrows the field immeasurably. We meet again in it. It is fate that I am here, persisted George, but you can call it Italy if it makes you less unhappy. Mr. Beebe slid away from such heavy treatment of the subject, but he was infinitely tolerant of the young, and had no desire to snub George. And so for this, and for other reasons, my history of coincidence is still to write. Silence. Wishing to round off the episode, he added, We are all so glad that you have come. Silence. Here we are, called Freddie. "Oh, good," exclaimed Mr. Beebe, mopping his brow. "In there's the pond. I wish it was bigger," he added apologetically. They climbed down a slippery bank of pine needles. There lay the pond, set in its little alp of green, only a pond, but large enough to contain the human body and pure enough to reflect the sky. On account of the rains, the waters had flooded the surrounding grass, which showed like a beautiful emerald path, tempting these feet towards the central pool. "It's distinctly successful, as ponds go," said Mr. Beebe. "No apologies are necessary for the pond." George sat down where the ground was dry and drearily unlaced his boots. "Aren't those masses of willow herb splendid? I love willow herb in seed. What's the name of this aromatic plant?" No one knew or seemed to care. These abrupt changes of vegetation, this little spongeous tract of water plants, and on either side of it all the growths are tough or brittle. Heather, bracken, hurts, pines. Very charming, very charming. "Mr. Beebe, aren't you bathing?" called Freddie as he stripped himself. Mr. Beebe thought he was not. "Water's wonderful," cried Freddie, prancing in. "Water's water," murmured George. Wetting his hair first, a sure sign of apathy, he followed Freddie into the divine, as indifferent as if he were a statue and the pond a pail of soapsuds. It was necessary to use his muscles. It was necessary to keep clean. Mr. Beebe watched them, and watched the seeds of the willow herb dance chorically above their heads. "A pooshu, a pooshu, a pooshu," went Freddie, swimming for 2 strokes in either direction, and then becoming involved in reeds or mud. "Is it worth it?" asked the other, Michelangelesque on the flooded margin. The bank broke away, and he fell into the pool before he had weighed the question properly. "Hey, poof, I've swallowed a pollywog, Mr. Beebe. Water's wonderful, water's simply ripping." "Water's not so bad," said George, reappearing from his plunge and sputtering at the sun. "Water's wonderful. Mr. Beebe, do." A pooshu coof. Mr. Beebe, who was hot and who always acquiesced where possible, looked around him. He could detect no parishioners except the pine trees, rising up steeply on all sides and gesturing to each other against the blue. How glorious it was! The world of motor cars and rural deans receded inimitably. Water, sky, evergreens, a wind, these things not even the seasons can touch, and surely they lie beyond the intrusion of man. I may as well wash too, and soon his garments made a third little pile on the sward, and he too asserted the wonder of the water. It was ordinary water, nor was there very much of it, and, as Freddie said, it reminded one of swimming in a salad. The 3 gentlemen rotated in the pool breast high after the fashion of the nymphs in Götterdämmerung. But either because the rains had given a freshness, or because the sun was shedding a most glorious heat, or because 2 of the gentlemen were young in years and the 3rd young in spirit, for some reason or other a change came over them, and they forgot Italy and botany and fate. They began to play. Mr. Beebe and Freddie splashed each other. A little deferentially, they splashed George. He was quiet. They feared they had offended him. Then all the forces of youth burst out. He smiled, flung himself at them, splashed them, ducked them, kicked them, muddied them, and drove them out of the pool. "Race you round it then," cried Freddie, and they raced in the sunshine, and George took a short cut and dirtied his shins and had to bathe a second time. Then Mr. Beebe consented to run, a memorable sight. They ran to get dry, they bathed to get cool, they played at being Indians in the willow herbs and in the bracken, they bathed to get clean. And all the time 3 little bundles lay discreetly on the sward, proclaiming, "No, we are what matters. Without us shall no enterprise begin. To us shall all flesh turn in the end." "A try! A try!" yelled Freddie, snatching up George's bundle and placing it beside an imaginary goal. "Post. Soccer rules," George retorted, scattering Freddie's bundle with a kick. "Goal! Goal! Pass! Take care, my watch!" cried Mr. Beebe. Clothes flew in all directions. "Take care, my hat! No, that's enough, Freddie. Dress now. No, I say." But the 2 young men were delirious. Away they twinkled into the trees, Freddie with a clerical waistcoat under his arm, George with a wide-awake hat on his dripping hair. "That'll do," shouted Mr. Beebe, remembering that after all he was in his own parish. Then his voice changed as if every pine tree was a rural dean. "Hi, steady on! I see people coming, you fellows," yells, and widening circles over the dappled earth. "Hi, hi, ladies!" Neither George nor Freddie was truly refined. Still, they did not hear Mr. Beebe's last warning, or they would have avoided Mrs. Honeychurch, Cecil, and Lucy, who were walking down to call on old Mrs. Butterworth. Freddie dropped the waistcoat at their feet and dashed into some bracken. George whooped in their faces, turned and scudded away down the path to the pond, still clad in Mr. Beebe's hat. "Gracious alive!" cried Mrs. Honeychurch. "Whoever were those unfortunate people? Oh dears, look away! And poor Mr. Beebe too! Whatever has happened?" "Come this way immediately," commanded Cecil, who always felt that he must lead women, though he knew not whither, and protect them, though he knew not against what. He led them now towards the bracken where Freddie sat concealed. "Oh, poor Mr. Beebe! Was that his waistcoat we left in the path?" "Cecil, Mr. Beebe's waistcoat." "No business of ours," said Cecil, glancing at Lucy, who was all parasol and evidently minded. "I fancy Mr. Beebe jumped back into the pond. This way, please, Mrs. Honeychurch, this way." They followed him up the bank, attempting the tense yet nonchalant expression that is suitable for ladies on such occasions. "Well, I can't help it," said a voice close ahead, and Freddie reared a freckled face and a pair of snowy shoulders out of the fronds. "I can't be trodden on, can I?" "Good gracious me, dear, so it's you! What miserable management! And not have a comfortable bath at home with hot and cold laid on. Look here, mother, a fellow must wash, and a fellow's got to dry, and if another fellow— Dear, no doubt you're right as usual, but you are in no position to argue. Come, Lucy." They turned. "Oh, look, don't look." Oh, poor Mr. Beebe, how unfortunate again. For Mr. Beebe was just crawling out of the pond, on whose surface garments of an intimate nature did float, while George, the world-weary George, shouted to Freddie that he had hooked a fish. "And me, I've swallowed one," answered he of the bracken. "I've swallowed a pollywog. It wriggleth in my tummy. I shall die, Emerson, you beast, you've got on my bags." "Hush, dears," said Mrs. Honeychurch, who found it impossible to remain shocked. "And do be sure you dry yourselves thoroughly first. All these colds come of not drying thoroughly." "Mother, do come away," said Lucy. "Oh, for goodness sake, do come." "Hullo," cried George, so that again the ladies stopped. He regarded himself as dressed. Barefoot, bare-chested, radiant and personable against the shadowy woods, he called, "Hullo, Miss Honeychurch, hullo. Bow, Lucy, better bow. Whoever is it? I shall bow." Miss Honeychurch bowed. That evening and all that night the water ran away. And the morrow, the pool had shrunk to its old size and lost its glory. It had been a call to the blood and to the relaxed will, a passing benediction whose influence did not pass, a holiness, a spell, a momentary chalice for youth. Chapter 13. How Miss Bartlett's boiler was so tiresome! How often had Lucy rehearsed this bow, this interview! But she had always rehearsed them indoors, and with certain accessories which surely we have a right to assume. Who could foretell that she and George would meet in the rout of a civilization, amidst an army of coats and collars and boots that lay wounded over the sunlit earth? She had imagined a young Mr. Emerson, who might be shy or morbid or indifferent or furtively impudent. She was prepared for all of these. But she had never imagined one who would be happy and greet her with the shout of the morning star. Indoors herself, partaking of tea with old Mrs. Butterworth, she reflected that it is impossible to foretell the future with any degree of accuracy, that it is impossible to rehearse life. A fault in the scenery, a face in the audience, an eruption of the audience onto the stage, and all our carefully planned gestures mean nothing, or mean too much. "I will bow," she had thought. "I will not shake hands with him. That will be just the proper thing." She had bowed, but to whom? To gods, to heroes, to the nonsense of schoolgirls. She had bowed across the rubbish that cumbers the world. So ran her thoughts, while her faculties were busy with Cecil. It was another of those dreadful engagement calls. Mrs. Butterworth had wanted to see him, and he did not want to be seen. He did not want to hear about hydrangeas, why they changed their colour at the seaside. He did not want to join the COS, When cross he was always elaborate, and made long, clever answers where yes or no would have done. Lucy soothed him and tinkered at the conversation in a way that promised well for their married peace. No one is perfect, and surely it is wiser to discover the imperfections before wedlock. Miss Bartlett, indeed, though not in word, had taught the girl that this our life contains nothing satisfactory. Lucy, though she disliked the teacher, regarded the teaching as profound and applied it to her lover. "Lucy," said her mother, when they got home, "is anything the matter with Cecil?" The question was ominous. Up till now Mrs. Honeychurch had behaved with charity and restraint. "No, I don't think so, Mother. Cecil's all right. Perhaps he's tired." Lucy compromised. Perhaps Cecil was a little tired. "Because otherwise—" she pulled out her bonnet pins with gathering displeasure. "Because otherwise I cannot account for him. I do think Mrs. Butterworth is rather tiresome, if you mean that. Cecil has told you to think so. You were devoted to her as a little girl, and nothing will describe her goodness to you through the typhoid fever. No, it is just the same thing everywhere. Let me just put your bonnet away, may I?" Surely he could answer her civilly for 1/2 hour. "Cecil has a very high standard for people," faltered Lucy, seeing trouble ahead. "It's part of his ideals. It is really that makes him sometimes seem—" "Oh, rubbish! If high ideals make a young man rude, the sooner he gets rid of them the better," said Mrs. Honeychurch, handing her the bonnet. "Now, Mother, I've seen you cross with Mrs. Butterworth yourself. Not in that way. At times I could wring her neck, but not in that way. No, it is the same with Cecil all over. By I never told you. I had a letter from Charlotte while I was away in London." This attempt to divert the conversation was too puerile, and Mrs. Honeychurch resented it. "Since Cecil came back from London, nothing appears to please him. Whenever I speak, he winces. I see him, Lucy. It is useless to contradict me. No doubt I am neither artistic nor literary, nor intellectual, nor musical, but I cannot help the drawing-room furniture. Your father bought it, and we must put up with it. Will Cecil kindly remember?" I see what you mean, and certainly Cecil oughtn't to. "But he does not mean to be uncivil," he once explained. "It is the things that upset him. He is easily upset by ugly things. He is not uncivil to people." "Is it a thing or a person when Freddie sings? You can't expect a really musical person to enjoy comic songs as we do." "Then why didn't he leave the room?" "Why sit wriggling and sneering and spoiling everyone's pleasure? We mustn't be unjust to people," faltered Lucy. Something had enfeebled her, and the case for Cecil, which she had mastered so perfectly in London, would not come forth in an effective form. The two civilizations had clashed. Cecil hinted that they might, and she was dazzled and bewildered, as though the radiance that lies behind all civilization had blinded her eyes. Good taste and bad taste were only catchwords, garments of diverse cut, and music itself dissolved to a whisper through pine trees, where the song is not distinguishable from the comic song. She remained in much embarrassment, while Mrs. Honeychurch changed her frock for dinner, and every now and then she said a word and made things no better. There was no concealing the fact Cecil had meant to be supercilious, and he had succeeded. And Lucy, she knew not why, wished that the trouble could have come at any other time. "Go and dress, dear, you'll be late." "All right, Mother. Don't say all right and stop. Go." She obeyed, but loitered disconsolately at the landing window. It faced north, so there was little view, and no view of the sky. Now, as in the winter, the pine trees hung close to her eyes. One connected the landing window with depression. No definite problem menaced her, but she sighed to herself, "Oh dear, what shall I do? What shall I do?" It seemed to her that everyone else was behaving very badly, and she ought not to have mentioned Miss Bartlett's letter. She must be more careful. Her mother was rather inquisitive, and might have asked what it was about. Oh dear, what should she do? And then Freddie came bounding upstairs and joined the ranks of the ill-behaved. I say, those are topping people. "My dear baby, how tiresome you've been. You have no business to take them bathing in the sacred lake. It's much too public. It was all right for you, but most awkward for everyone else. Do be more careful. You forget the place is growing half suburban. I say, is anything on tomorrow week? Not that I know of. Then I want to ask the Emersons up to Sunday tennis. Oh, I wouldn't do that, Freddie. I wouldn't do that with all this muddle. What's wrong with the court? They won't mind a bump or two, and I've ordered new balls. I meant it's better not. I really mean it. He seized her by the elbows and humorously danced her up and down the passage. She pretended not to mind, but she could have screamed with temper. Cecil glanced at them as he proceeded to his toilet, and they impeded Mary with her brood of hot water cans. Then Mrs. Honeychurch opened her door and said, "Lucy, what a noise you're making." "I have something to say to you. Did you say you had had a letter from Charlotte?" And Freddie ran away. "Yes. I really can't stop. I must dress too." "How's Charlotte?" "All right." "Lucy," the unfortunate girl returned, "you've a bad habit of hurrying away in the middle of one's sentences. Did Charlotte mention her boiler?" "Her what?" "Don't you remember that her boiler was to be had out in October, and her bath cistern cleaned out, and all kinds of terrible to-doings?" "I can't remember all Charlotte's worries," said Lucy bitterly. "I shall have enough of my own, now that you are not pleased with Cecil." Mrs. Honeychurch might have flamed out. She did not. She said, "Come here, old lady. Thank you for putting away my bonnet, kiss me." And, though nothing is perfect, Lucy felt for the moment that her mother and Windy Corner and the Weald in the declining sun were perfect. So the grittiness went out of life. It generally did at Windy Corner. At the last minute, when the social machine was clogged hopelessly, one member or other of the family poured in a drop of oil. Cecil despised their methods, perhaps rightly. At all events, they were not his own. Dinner was at 7:30. Freddie gabbled the grace, and they drew up their heavy chairs and fell to. Fortunately, the men were hungry. Nothing untoward occurred until the pudding. Then Freddie said, "Lucy, what's Emerson like?" "I saw him in Florence," said Lucy, hoping that this would pass for a reply. "Is he the clever sort, or is he a decent chap?" asked Cecil. "It is Cecil who brought him here." "He is the clever sort, like myself," said Cecil. Freddie looked at him doubtfully. "How well did you know them at the Bertolini?" asked Mrs. Honeychurch. "Oh, very slightly." "I mean, Charlotte knew them even less than I did." "Oh, that reminds me, you never told me what Charlotte said in her letter." "One thing and another," said Lucy, wondering whether she would get through the meal without a lie. "Among other things, that an awful friend of hers had been bicycling through Summer Street, wondered if she'd come up and see us, and mercifully didn't. Lucy, I do call the way you talk unkind." "She was a novelist," said Lucy craftily. The remark was a happy one, for nothing roused Mrs. Honeychurch so much as literature in the hands of females. She would abandon every topic to inveigh against those women who, instead of minding their houses and their children, seek notoriety by print. Her attitude was, if books must be written, let them be written by men, and she developed it at great length, while Cecil yawned and Freddie played at this year, next year, now, never, with his plumstones, and Lucy artfully fed the flames of her mother's wrath. But soon the conflagration died down, and the ghosts began to gather in the darkness. There were too many ghosts about. The original ghost, that touch of lips on her cheek, had surely been laid long ago. It could be nothing to her that a man had kissed her on a mountain once. But it had begotten a spectral family, Mr. Harris, Miss Bartlett's letter, Mr. Beebe's memories of violets, and one or other of these was bound to haunt her before Cecil's very eyes. It was Miss Bartlett who returned now, and with appalling vividness. "I have been thinking, Lucy, of that letter of Charlotte's. How is she?" I tore the thing up. "Didn't she say how she was? How does she sound? Cheerful?" "Oh, yes, I suppose so. No, not very cheerful, I suppose." "Then, depend upon it, it is the boiler. I know myself how water preys upon one's mind." "I would rather anything else, even a misfortune with the meat." Cecil laid his hand over his eyes. "So would I," asserted Freddie, backing his mother up, backing up the spirit of her remark rather than the substance. "And I have been thinking," she added rather nervously, "surely we could squeeze Charlotte in here next week and give her a nice holiday while the plumbers at Tunbridge Wells finish. I have not seen poor Charlotte for so long." It was more than her nerves could stand, and she could not protest violently after her mother's goodness to her upstairs. "Mother, no," she pleaded. "It's impossible. We can't have Charlotte on the top of the other things. We're squeezed to death as it is. Freddie's got a friend coming Tuesday, there's Cecil, and you've promised to take in Minnie Beebe because of the diphtheria scare. It simply can't be done. Nonsense. It can, if Minnie sleeps in the bath, not otherwise. Minnie can sleep with you. I won't have her. Then, if you're so selfish, Mr. Floyd must share a room with Freddie. Miss Bartlett, Miss Bartlett, Miss Bartlett, moaned Cecil, again laying his hand over his eyes. It's impossible, repeated Lucy. I don't want to make difficulties, but it really isn't fair on the maids to fill up the house so. Alas. The truth is, dear, you don't like Charlotte. No, I don't, and no more does Cecil. She gets on our nerves. You haven't seen her lately, and don't realise how tiresome she can be, though so good. So please, Mother, don't worry us this last summer, but spoil us by not asking her to come. Here, here, said Cecil. Mrs. Honeychurch, with more gravity than usual, and with more feeling than she usually permitted herself, replied, This isn't very kind of you two. You have each other and all these woods to walk in, so full of beautiful things, and poor Charlotte has only the water turned off and plumbers. You are young, dears, and however clever young people are, and however many books they read, they will never guess what it feels like to grow old. Cecil crumbled his bread. I must say Cousin Charlotte was very kind to me that year I called on my bike, put in Freddie. She thanked me for coming till I felt like such a fool, and fussed round no end to get an egg boiled for my tea just right. I know, dear, she is kind to everyone, and yet Lucy makes this difficulty when we try to give her some little return. But Lucy hardened her heart. It was no good being kind to Miss Bartlett. She had tried herself too often and too recently. One might lay up treasure in heaven by the attempt, but one enriched neither Miss Bartlett nor anyone else upon earth. She was reduced to saying, I can't help it, Mother, I don't like Charlotte. I admit it's horrid of me. From your own account, you told her as much. Well, she would leave Florence so stupidly, she flurried. The ghosts were returning. They filled Italy. They were even usurping the places she had known as a child. The sacred lake would never be the same again, and on Sunday week something would even happen to Windy Corner. How would she fight against ghosts? For a moment the visible world faded away, and memories and emotions alone seemed real. I suppose Miss Bartlett must come, since she boils eggs so well, said Cecil, who was in rather a happier frame of mind thanks to the admirable cooking. I didn't mean the egg was well boiled, corrected Freddie, because in point of fact she forgot to take it off, and as a matter of fact I don't care for eggs. I only meant how jolly kind she seemed. Cecil frowned again. Oh, these Honeychurches. Eggs, boilers, hydrangeas, maids, of such were their lives compact. May me and Lucy get down from our chairs? He asked, with scarcely veiled insolence. We don't want no dessert. Chapter 14. How Lucy faced the external situation bravely, of course, Miss Bartlett accepted, and, equally of course, she felt sure that she would prove a nuisance, and begged to be given an inferior spare room, something with no view, anything, her love to Lucy. And, equally of course, George Emerson could come to tennis on the Sunday week. Lucy faced the situation bravely, though, like most of us, she only faced the situation that encompassed her. She never gazed inwards. If at times strange images rose from the depths, she put them down to nerves. When Cecil brought the Emersons to Summer Street, it had upset her nerves. Charlotte would burnish up past foolishness, and this might upset her nerves. She was nervous at night. When she talked to George, they met again almost immediately at the rectory. His voice moved her deeply, and she wished to remain near him. How dreadful if she really wished to remain near him. Of course, the wish was due to nerves, which love to play such perverse tricks upon us. Once she had suffered from things that came out of nothing, and meant she didn't know what. Now Cecil had explained psychology to her one wet afternoon, and all the troubles of youth in an unknown world could be dismissed. It is obvious enough for the reader to conclude she loves young Emerson. A reader in Lucy's place would not find it obvious. Life is easy to chronicle, but bewildering to practice, and we welcome nerves or any other shibboleth that will cloak our personal desire. She loved Cecil, George made her nervous. Will the reader explain to her that the phrases should have been reversed? But the external situation, she will face that bravely. The meeting at the rectory had passed off well enough. Standing between Mr. Beebe and Cecil, she had made a few temperate allusions to Italy, and George had replied. She was anxious to show that she was not shy, and was glad that he did not seem shy either. "A nice fellow," said Mr. Beebe afterwards. "He will work off his crudities in time. I rather mistrust young men who slip into life gracefully." Lucy said, "He seems in better spirits. He laughs more." "Yes," replied the clergyman, "he is waking up." That was all. But as the week wore on, more of her defences fell, and she entertained an image that had physical beauty. In spite of the clearest directions, Miss Bartlett contrived to bungle her arrival. She was due at the south-eastern station at Dorking, whither Mrs. Honeychurch drove to meet her. She arrived at the London and Brighton station and had to hire a cab up. No one was at home except Freddie and his friend, who had to stop their tennis and to entertain her for a solid hour. Cecil and Lucy turned up at 4 o'clock, and these, with little Minnie Beebe, made a somewhat lugubrious sextet upon the upper lawn for tea. "I shall never forgive myself," said Miss Bartlett, who kept on rising from her seat and had to be begged by the United Company to remain. "I have upset everything, bursting in on young people, but I insist on paying for my cab up." "Grant that, at any rate." "Our visitors never do such dreadful things," said Lucy, while her brother, in whose memory the boiled egg had already grown unsubstantial, exclaimed in irritable tones, "Just what I've been trying to convince Cousin Charlotte of, Lucy, for the last half hour." "I do not feel myself an ordinary visitor," said Miss Bartlett, and looked at her frayed glove. "All right, if you'd really rather. 5 shillings, and I gave a bob to the driver." Miss Bartlett looked in her purse, only sovereigns and pennies. Could anyone give her change? Freddie had half a quid, and his friend had 4 half-crowns. Miss Bartlett accepted their moneys and then said, "But who am I to give the sovereign to?" "Let's leave it all till Mother comes back," suggested Lucy. "No, dear, your mother may take quite a long drive now that she is not hampered with me. We all have our little foibles, and mine is the prompt settling of accounts." Here Freddie's friend, Mr. Floyd, made the one remark of his that need be quoted. He offered to toss Freddie for Miss Bartlett's quid. A solution seemed in sight, and even Cecil, who had been ostentatiously drinking his tea at the View, felt the eternal attraction of chance and turned round. But this did not do either. "Please, please, I know I am a sad spoil-sport, but it would make me wretched. I should practically be robbing the one who lost." "Freddie owes me 15 shillings, interposed Cecil. "So it will work out right if you give the pound to me." 15 shillings, said Miss Bartlett dubiously. "How is that, Mr. Vyse? Because, don't you see, Freddie paid your cab. Give me the pound, and we shall avoid this deplorable gambling." Miss Bartlett, who was poor at figures, became bewildered and rendered up the sovereign amidst the suppressed gurgles of the other youths. For a moment Cecil was happy. He was playing at nonsense among his peers. Then he glanced at Lucy, in whose face petty anxieties had marred the smiles. In January he would rescue his Leonardo from this stupefying twaddle. "But I don't see that," exclaimed Minnie Beebe, who had narrowly watched the iniquitous transaction. "I don't see why Mr. Vyse is to have the quid. Because of the 15 shillings and the 5, they said solemnly. 15 shillings and 5 shillings make £1, you see." "But I don't see—" They tried to stifle her with cake. "No, thank you, I'm done. I don't see why, Freddie, don't poke me. Miss Honeychurch, your brother's hurting me. Ow! What about Mr. Floyd's 10 shillings? Ow! No, I don't see, and I never shall see why Miss her name shouldn't pay that bob for the driver." "I had forgotten the driver," said Miss Bartlett, reddening. "Thank you, dear, for reminding me. 1 shilling, was it? Can anyone give me change for half a crown?" "I'll get it," said the young hostess, rising with decision. "Cecil, give me that sovereign. No, give me up that sovereign. I'll get Euphemia to change it, and we'll start the whole thing again from the beginning." "Lucy, Lucy, what a nuisance I am," protested Miss Bartlett, and followed her across the lawn. Lucy tripped ahead, simulating hilarity. When they were out of earshot, Miss Bartlett stopped her wails and said quite briskly, Have you told him about him yet?" "No, I haven't," replied Lucy, and then could have bitten her tongue for understanding so quickly what her cousin meant. "Let me see, a sovereign's worth of silver." She escaped into the kitchen. Miss Bartlett's sudden transitions were too uncanny. It sometimes seemed as if she planned every word she spoke or caused to be spoken, as if all this worry about cabs and change had been a ruse to surprise the soul. "No, I haven't told Cecil or anyone," she remarked when she returned. "I promised you I shouldn't. Here is your money, all shillings, except 2 half-crowns. Would you count it? You can settle your debt nicely now." Miss Bartlett was in the drawing-room, gazing at the photograph of Stant John ascending, which had been framed. "How dreadful," she murmured, "how more than dreadful, if Mr. Vyse should come to hear of it from some other source." "Oh, no, Charlotte," said the girl, entering the battle. "George Emerson is all right, and what other source is there?" Miss Bartlett considered. "For instance, the driver. I saw him looking through the bushes at you. Remember, he had a violet between his teeth." Lucy shuddered a little. "We shall get the silly affair on our nerves if we aren't careful. How could a Florentine cab driver ever get hold of Cecil? We must think of every possibility." "Oh, it's all right. Or perhaps old Mr. Emerson knows. In fact, he is certain to know." "I don't care if he does. I was grateful to you for your letter, but even if the news does get round, I think I can trust Cecil to laugh at it." To contradict it? No, to laugh at it. But she knew in her heart that she could not trust him, for he desired her untouched. "Very well, dear, you know best. Perhaps gentlemen are different to what they were when I was young. Ladies are certainly different. Now, Charlotte," she struck at her playfully, "you kind, anxious thing, what would you have me do? First you say don't tell, and then you say tell. Which is it to be?" "Quick," Miss Bartlett sighed. "I am no match for you in conversation, dearest. I blush when I think how I interfered at Florence, and you so well able to look after yourself, and so much cleverer in all ways than I am. You will never forgive me. Shall we go out then?" "They will smash all the china if we don't." For the air rang with the shrieks of Minnie, who was being scalped with a teaspoon. "Dear, one moment. We may not have this chance for a chat again. Have you seen the young one yet?" "Yes, I have." "What happened?" "We met at the rectory." "What line is he taking up?" "No line." "He talked about Italy, like any other person. It is really all right. What advantage would he get from being a cad, to put it bluntly? I do wish I could make you see it my way. He really won't be any nuisance, Charlotte. Once a cad, always a cad. That is my poor opinion." Lucy paused. "Cecil said one day, and I thought it so profound, that there are 2 kinds of cads, the conscious and the subconscious." She paused again, to be sure of doing justice to Cecil's profundity. Through the window she saw Cecil himself, turning over the pages of a novel. It was a new one from Smith's library. Her mother must have returned from the station. "Once a cad, always a cad," droned Miss Bartlett. "What I mean by subconscious is that Emerson lost his head. I fell into all those violets, and he was silly and surprised. I don't think we ought to blame him very much. It makes such a difference when you see a person with beautiful things behind him unexpectedly. It really does. It makes an enormous difference. And he lost his head. He doesn't admire me, or any of that nonsense, one straw. Freddie rather likes him, and has asked him up here on Sunday, so you can judge for yourself. He has improved. He doesn't always look as if he's going to burst into tears. He is a clerk in the general manager's office at one of the big railways, not a porter, and runs down to his father for weekends. Papa was to do with journalism, but is rheumatic and has retired. There, now for the garden." She took hold of her guest by the arm. "Suppose we don't talk about this silly Italian business any more. We want you to have a nice restful visit at Windy Corner, with no worriting." Lucy thought this rather a good speech. The reader may have detected an unfortunate slip in it. Whether Miss Bartlett detected the slip one cannot say, for it is impossible to penetrate into the minds of elderly people. She might have spoken further, but they were interrupted by the entrance of her hostess. Explanations took place, and in the midst of them Lucy escaped, the images throbbing a little more vividly in her brain. Chapter 15. The disaster within the Sunday after Miss Bartlett's arrival was a glorious day, like most of the days of that year. In the Weald, autumn approached, breaking up the green monotony of summer, touching the parks with the grey bloom of mist, the beech trees with russet, the oak trees with gold. Up on the heights, battalions of black pines witnessed the change, themselves unchangeable. Either country was spanned by a cloudless sky, and in either arose the tinkle of church bells. The garden of Windy Corners was deserted except for a red book which lay sunning itself upon the gravel path. From the house came incoherent sounds, as of females preparing for worship. The men say they won't go. Well, I don't blame them, Minnie says. Need she go? Tell her, no nonsense. Anne. Mary, hook me behind. Dearest Lucia, may I trespass upon you for a pin? For Miss Bartlett had announced that she at all events was one for church. The sun rose higher on its journey, guided not by Phaethon, but by Apollo, competent, unswerving, divine. Its rays fell on the ladies whenever they advanced towards the bedroom windows, on Mr. Beebe down at Summer Street, as he smiled over a letter from Miss Catherine Allen, on George Emerson cleaning his father's boots, and lastly, to complete the catalogue of memorable things, on the red book mentioned previously. The ladies move, Mr. Beebe moves, George moves, and movement may engender shadow. But this book lies motionless, to be caressed all the morning by the sun, and to raise its covers slightly, as though acknowledging the caress. Presently, Lucy steps out of the drawing-room window. Her new cerise dress has been a failure, and makes her look tawdry and wan. At her throat is a garnet brooch, on her finger a ring set with rubies, an engagement ring. Her eyes are bent to the Weald. She frowns a little, not in anger, but as a brave child frowns when he is trying not to cry. In all that expanse no human eye is looking at her, and she may frown unrebuked and measure the spaces that yet survive between Apollo and the western hills. Lucy, Lucy, what's that book? Who's been taking a book out of the shelf and leaving it about to spoil? It's only the library book that Cecil's been reading. But pick it up, and don't stand idling there like a flamingo. Lucy picked up the book and glanced at the title listlessly, under a loggia. She no longer read novels herself, devoting all her spare time to solid literature in the hope of catching Cecil up. It was dreadful how little she knew, and even when she thought she knew a thing, like the Italian painters, she found she had forgotten it. Only this morning she had confused Francesco with Piero della Francesca, and Cecil had said, "What? You aren't forgetting your Italy already?" And this too had lent anxiety to her eyes when she saluted the dear view and the dear garden in the foreground, and above them, scarcely conceivable elsewhere, the dear sun. "Lucy, have you a sixpence for Minnie and a shilling for yourself?" She hastened in to her mother, who was rapidly working herself into a Sunday fluster. "It's a special collection. I forget what for. I do beg, no vulgar clinking in the plate with halfpennies. See that Minnie has a nice bright sixpence." "Where is the child? Minnie! That book's all warped." "Gracious, how plain you look. Put it under the atlas to press. Minnie! Oh, Mrs. Honeychurch from the upper regions. Minnie, don't be late. Here comes the horse." It was always the horse, never the carriage. "Where's Charlotte? Run up and hurry her." "Why is she so long?" "She had nothing to do. She never brings anything but blouses." "Poor Charlotte! How I do detest blouses. Minnie." Paganism is infectious, more infectious than diphtheria or piety, and the rector's niece was taken to church protesting. As usual, she didn't see why. Why shouldn't she sit in the sun with the young men? The young men, who had now appeared, mocked her with ungenerous words. Mrs. Honeychurch defended orthodoxy, and in the midst of the confusion Miss Bartlett, dressed in the very height of the fashion, came strolling down the stairs. "Dear Marian, I am very sorry, but I have no small change, nothing but sovereigns and half-crowns. Could anyone give me—" "Yes, easily. Jump in. Gracious me, how smart you look. What a lovely frock. You put us all to shame." "If I did not wear my best rags and tatters now, when should I wear them?" said Miss Bartlett reproachfully. She got into the victoria and placed herself with her back to the horse. The necessary roar ensued, and then they drove off. "Goodbye, be good, called out Cecil. Lucy bit her lip, for the tone was sneering. On the subject of church and so on, they had had rather an unsatisfactory conversation. He had said that people ought to overhaul themselves, and she did not want to overhaul herself. She did not know it was done. Honest orthodoxy. Cecil respected, but he always assumed that honesty is the result of a spiritual crisis. He could not imagine it as a natural birthright that might grow heavenward like flowers. All that he said on this subject pained her. Though he exuded tolerance from every pore, somehow the Emersons were different. She saw the Emersons after church. There was a line of carriages down the road, and the Honeychurch vehicle happened to be opposite Sissy Villa. To save time, they walked over the green to it, and found father and son smoking in the garden. "Introduce me," said her mother. "Unless the young man considers that he knows me already." He probably did, but Lucy ignored the sacred lake and introduced them formally. Old Mr. Emerson claimed her with much warmth, and said how glad he was that she was going to be married. She said yes, she was glad too, and then, as Miss Bartlett and Minnie were lingering behind with Mr. Beebe, she turned the conversation to a less disturbing topic, and asked him how he liked his new house. "Very much," he replied, but there was a note of offence in his voice. She had never known him offended before. He added, "We find, though, that the Miss Allens were coming, and that we have turned them out. Women mind such a thing. I am very much upset about it." "I believe that there was some misunderstanding," said Mrs. Honeychurch uneasily. "Our landlord was told that we should be a different type of person," said George, who seemed disposed to carry the matter further. "He thought we should be artistic. He is disappointed. And I wonder whether we ought to write to the Miss Allens and offer to give it up. What do you think?" he appealed to Lucy. "Oh, stop now, you have come," said Lucy lightly. She must avoid censuring Cecil, for it was on Cecil that the little episode turned, though his name was never mentioned. "So George says. He says that the Miss Allens must go to the wall, yet it does seem so unkind." "There is only a certain amount of kindness in the world," said George, watching the sunlight flash on the panels of the passing carriages. "Yes," exclaimed Mrs. Honeychurch, "that's exactly what I say. Why all this twiddling and twaddling over two Miss Allens?" "There is a certain amount of kindness just as there is a certain amount of light," he continued in measured tones. "We cast a shadow on something wherever we stand, and it is no good moving from place to place to save things, because the shadow always follows. Choose a place where you won't do harm. Yes, choose a place where you won't do very much harm, and stand in it for all you are worth, facing the sunshine. Oh, Mr. Emerson, I see you're clever." I see you're going to be clever. I hope you didn't go behaving like that to poor Freddie." George's eyes laughed, and Lucy suspected that he and her mother would get on rather well. "No, I didn't," he said. "He behaved that way to me. It is his philosophy. Only he starts life with it, and I have tried the note of interrogation first." "What do you mean?" "No, never mind what you mean. Don't explain. He looks forward to seeing you this afternoon. Do you play tennis?" "Do you mind tennis on Sunday?" "George, mind tennis on Sunday." George, after his education, distinguished between Sunday. "Very well, George doesn't mind tennis on Sunday. No more do I. That's settled. Mr. Emerson, if you could come with your son, we should be so pleased." He thanked her, but the walk sounded rather far. He could only potter about in these days. She turned to George. "And then he wants to give up his house to the Miss Allens." "I know," said George, and put his arm round his father's neck. The kindness that Mr. Beebe and Lucy had always known to exist in him came out suddenly, like sunlight touching a vast landscape, a touch of the morning sun. She remembered that, in all his perversities, he had never spoken against affection. Miss Bartlett approached. "You know our cousin, Miss Bartlett," said Mrs. Honeychurch pleasantly. "You met her with my daughter in Florence." "Yes, indeed," said the old man, and made as if he would come out of the garden to meet the lady. Miss Bartlett promptly got into the Victoria. Thus entrenched, she emitted a formal bow. It was the Pension Bertolini again, the dining table with the decanters of water and wine. It was the old battle of the room with the view. George did not respond to the bow. Like any boy, he blushed and was ashamed. He knew that the chaperone remembered. He said, "I'll come up to tennis if I can manage it," and went into the house. Perhaps anything that he did would have pleased Lucy, but his awkwardness went straight to her heart. Men were not gods after all, but as human and as clumsy as girls. Even men might suffer from unexplained desires and need help. To one of her upbringing and of her destination, the weakness of men was a truth unfamiliar, but she had surmised it at Florence when George threw her photographs into the River Arno. "George, don't go," cried his father, who thought it a great treat for people if his son would talk to them. "George has been in such good spirits today, and I am sure he will end by coming up this afternoon." Lucy caught her cousin's eye. Something in its mute appeal made her reckless. "Yes," she said, raising her voice, "I do hope he will." Then she went to the carriage and murmured, "The old man hasn't been told. I knew it was all right." Mrs. Honeychurch followed her, and they drove away. Satisfactory that Mr. Emerson had not been told of the Florence escapade, yet Lucy's spirits should not have leapt up as if she had sighted the ramparts of heaven. Satisfactory, yet surely she greeted it with disproportionate joy. All the way home the horse's hoofs sang a tune to her. "He has not told, he has not told." Her brain expanded the melody. "He has not told his Father, to whom he tells all things. It was not an exploit. He did not laugh at me when I had gone." She raised her hand to her cheek. "He does not love me. No. How terrible if he did, but he has not told, he will not tell." She longed to shout the words, "It is all right. It's a secret between us two forever. Cecil will never hear." She was even glad that Miss Bartlett had made her promise secrecy, that last dark evening at Florence when they had knelt packing in his room. The secret, big or little, was guarded. Only 3 English people knew of it in the world. Thus she interpreted her joy. She greeted Cecil with unusual radiance because she felt so safe. As he helped her out of the carriage, she said, "The Emersons have been so nice. George Emerson has improved enormously." "How are my protégés?" asked Cecil, who took no real interest in them and had long since forgotten his resolution to bring them to Windy Corner for educational purposes. "Protégé!" she exclaimed with some warmth. For the only relationship which Cecil conceived was feudal, that of protector and protected. He had no glimpse of the comradeship after which the girl's soul yearned. "You shall see for yourself how your protégés are. George Emerson is coming up this afternoon. He is a most interesting man to talk to. Only don't," she nearly said, "don't protect him." But the bell was ringing for lunch, and as often happened, Cecil had paid no great attention to her remarks. Charm, not argument, was to be her forte. Lunch was a cheerful meal. Generally Lucy was depressed at meals. Someone had to be soothed, either Cecil or Miss Bartlett or a being not visible to the mortal eye, a being who whispered to her soul, "It will not last, this cheerfulness. In January you must go to London to entertain the grandchildren of celebrated men." But today she felt she had received a guarantee. Her mother would always sit there, her brother here. The sun, though it had moved a little since the morning, would never be hidden behind the western hills. After luncheon they asked her to play. She had seen Gluck's Armide that year, and played from memory the music of the Enchanted Garden, the music to which Renaud approaches, beneath the light of an eternal dawn, the music that never gains, never wanes, but ripples forever like the tideless seas of fairyland. Such music is not for the piano, and her audience began to get restive, and Cecil, sharing the discontent, called out, "Now play us the other garden, the one in Parsifal." She closed the instrument. "Not very dutiful," said her mother's voice. Fearing that she had offended Cecil, she turned quickly round. There George was. He had crept in without interrupting her. "Oh, I had no idea," she exclaimed, getting very red, and then, without a word of greeting, she reopened the piano. Cecil should have the Parsifal and anything else that he liked. "Our performer has changed her mind," said Miss Bartlett, perhaps implying she will play the music to Mr. Emerson. Lucy did not know what to do, nor even what she wanted to do. She played a few bars of the Flower Maiden's song very badly, and then she stopped. "I vote tennis," said Freddie, disgusted at the scrappy entertainment. "Yes, so do I." Once more she closed the unfortunate piano. "I vote you have a men's four." "All right, not for me, thank you," said Cecil. "I will not spoil the set." He never realized that it may be an act of kindness in a bad player to make up a fourth. "Oh, come along, Cecil. I'm bad, Floyd's rotten, and so I dare say's Emerson." George corrected him. "I am not bad." One looked down one's nose at this. "Then certainly I won't play," said Cecil, while Miss Bartlett, under the impression that she was snubbing George, added, "I agree with you, Mr. Vesey. You had much better not play, much better not." Minnie, rushing in where Cecil feared to tread, announced that she would play. "I shall miss every ball anyway, so what does it matter?" But Sunday intervened and stamped heavily upon the kindly suggestion. "Then it will have to be Lucy," said Mrs. Honeychurch. "You must fall back on Lucy." "There is no other way out of it. Lucy, go and change your frock." Lucy's Sabbath was generally of this amphibious nature. She kept it without hypocrisy in the morning, and broke it without reluctance in the afternoon. As she changed her frock, she wondered whether Cecil was sneering at her. Really, she must overhaul herself and settle everything up before she married him. Mr. Floyd was her partner. She liked music, but how much better tennis seemed. How much better to run about in comfortable clothes than to sit at the piano and feel girt under the arms. Once more music appeared to her the employment of a child. George served and surprised her by his anxiety to win. She remembered how he had sighed among the tombs at Santa Croce, because things wouldn't fit, how after the death of that obscure Italian he had leant over the parapet by the Arno and said to her, "I shall want to live, I tell you." He wanted to live now, to win at tennis, to stand for all he was worth in the sun which had begun to decline and was shining in her eyes, and he did win. Ah, how beautiful the Weald looked! The hills stood out above its radiance, as Fiesole stands above the Tuscan plain, and the South Downs, if one chose, were the mountains of Carrara. She might be forgetting her Italy, but she was noticing more things in her England. One could play a new game with the view, and try to find in its innumerable folds some town or village that would do for Florence. Ah, how beautiful the Weald looked! But now Cecil claimed her. He chanced to be in a lucid, critical mood, and would not sympathize with exaltation. He had been rather a nuisance all through the tennis, for the novel that he was reading was so bad that he was obliged to read it aloud to others. He would stroll round the precincts of the court and call out, "I say, listen to this, Lucy." 3 split infinitives. "Dreadful," said Lucy, and missed her stroke. When they had finished their set, he still went on reading. There was some murder scene, and really everyone must listen to it. Freddie and Mr. Floyd were obliged to hunt for a lost ball in the laurels, but the other two acquiesced. The scene is laid in Florence. "What fun, Cecil!" "Read away. Come, Mr. Emerson, sit down after all your energy." She had forgiven George, as she put it, and she made a point of being pleasant to him. He jumped over the net and sat down at her feet, asking, "You, and are you tired?" "Of course I'm not. Do you mind being beaten?" She was going to answer, "No," when it struck her that she did mind, so she answered, "Yes." She added merrily, "I don't see you're such a splendid player, though." "The light was behind you, and it was in my eyes." "I never said I was." "Why, you did. You didn't attend. You said, 'Oh, don't go in for accuracy at this house. We all exaggerate, and we get very angry with people who don't.'" "The scene is laid in Florence," repeated Cecil, with an upward note. Lucy recollected herself. "Sunset. Leonora was speeding." Lucy interrupted. "Leonora? Is Leonora the heroine? Who's the book by?" "Joseph Emery Prank." "Sunset. Leonora speeding across the square. Pray the saints she might not arrive too late. Sunset, the sunset of Italy. Under Orcagna's loggia. The Loggia di Lanzi, as we sometimes call it now." Lucy burst into laughter. "Joseph Emery Prank indeed. Why, it's Miss Lavish. It's Miss Lavish's novel, and she's publishing it under somebody else's name. Who may Miss Lavish be?" "Oh, a dreadful person, Mr. Emerson. You remember Miss Lavish?" Excited by her pleasant afternoon, she clapped her hands. George looked up. Of course I do. I saw her the day I arrived at Summer Street. It was she who told me that you lived here. Weren't you pleased? She meant to see Miss Lavish. But when he bent down to the grass without replying, it struck her that she could mean something else. She watched his head, which was almost resting against her knee, and she thought that the ears were reddening. No wonder the novel's bad, she added. I never liked Miss Lavish, but I suppose one ought to read it as one's met her. All modern books are bad, said Cecil, who was annoyed at her inattention and vented his annoyance on literature. Everyone writes for money in these days. Oh, Cecil, it is so. I will inflict Joseph Emery prank on you no longer. Cecil this afternoon seemed such a twittering sparrow. The ups and downs in his voice were noticeable, but they did not affect her. She had dwelt amongst melody and movement, and her nerves refused to answer to the clang of his. Leaving him to be annoyed, she gazed at the black head again. She did not want to stroke it, but she saw herself wanting to stroke it. The sensation was curious. How do you like this view of ours, Mr. Emerson? I never notice much difference in views. What do you mean? Because they're all alike. Because all that matters in them is distance and air. Said Cecil, uncertain whether the remark was striking or not. My father, he looked up at her, and he was a little flushed, says that there is only one perfect view, the view of the sky straight over our heads, and that all these views on earth are but bungled copies of it. I expect your father has been reading Dante, said Cecil, fingering the novel, which alone permitted him to lead the conversation. He told us another day that views are really crowds of trees and houses and hills, and are bound to resemble each other, like human crowds, and that the power they have over us is sometimes supernatural for the same reason. Lucy's lips parted. For a crowd is more than the people who make it up. Something gets added to it. No one knows how, just as something has got added to those hills. He pointed with his racket to the South Downs. What a splendid idea, she murmured. I shall enjoy hearing your father talk again. I'm so sorry he's not so well. No, he isn't well. There's an absurd account of a view in this book, said Cecil. Also that men fall into two classes, those who forget views and those who remember them, even in small rooms. Mr. Emerson, have you any brothers or sisters? None. Why, you spoke of us. My mother, I was meaning. Cecil closed the novel with a bang. Oh, Cecil, how you made me jump. I will inflict Joseph Emery prank on you no longer. I can just remember us all three going into the country for the day and seeing as far as Hindhead. It is the first thing that I remember. Cecil got up. The man was ill-bred. He hadn't put on his coat after tennis. He didn't do. He would have strolled away if Lucy had not stopped him. Cecil, do read the thing about the view. Not while Mr. Emerson is here to entertain us. No, read away. I think nothing's funnier than to hear silly things read out loud. If Mr. Emerson thinks us frivolous, he can go. This struck Cecil as subtle and pleased him. It put their visitor in the position of a prig. Somewhat mollified, he sat down again. Mr. Emerson, go and find tennis balls. She opened the book. Cecil must have his reading and anything else that he liked. But her attention wandered to George's mother, who, according to Mr. Eager, had been murdered in the sight of God and, according to her son, had seen as far as Hindhead. Am I really to go? Asked George. No, of course not really, she answered. Chapter 2, said Cecil, yawning. Find me Chapter 2 if it isn't bothering you. Chapter 2 was found, and she glanced at its opening sentences. She thought she had gone mad. Here, hand me the book. She heard her voice saying, It isn't worth reading. It's too silly to read. I never saw such rubbish. It oughtn't to be allowed to be printed. He took the book from her. Leonora, he read, sat pensive and alone. Before her lay the rich champaign of Tuscany, dotted over with many a smiling village. The season was spring, Miss Lavish knew somehow, and had printed the past in draggled prose for Cecil to read and for George to hear. A golden haze, he read. He read, afar off the towers of Florence, while the bank on which she sat was carpeted with violets. All unobserved Antonio stole up behind her. Lest Cecil should see her face, she turned to George and saw his face. He read, There came from his lips no wordy protestation such as formal lovers use. No eloquence was his, nor did he suffer from the lack of it. He simply enfolded her in his manly arms. "This isn't the passage I wanted," he informed them. "There is another much funnier further on." He turned over the leaves. "Should we go in to tea?" said Lucy, whose voice remained steady. She led the way up the garden, Cecil following her, George last. She thought a disaster was averted. But when they entered the shrubbery it came. The book, as if it had not worked mischief enough, had been forgotten, and Cecil must go back for it, and George, who loved passionately, must blunder against her in the narrow path. "No!" she gasped, and, for the second time, was kissed by him. As if no more was possible, he slipped back. Cecil rejoined her. They reached the upper lawn alone. Chapter 16. Lying to George but Lucy had developed since the spring. That is to say, she was now better able to stifle the emotions of which the conventions and the world disapprove. Though the danger was greater, she was not shaken by deep sobs. She said to Cecil, "I am not coming in to tea. Tell Mother, I must write some letters," and went up to her room. Then she prepared for action. Love felt and returned, love which our bodies exact and our hearts have transfigured, love which is the most real thing that we shall ever meet, reappeared now as the world's enemy, and she must stifle it. She sent for Miss Bartlett. The contest lay not between love and duty. Perhaps there never is such a contest. It lay between the real and the pretended, and Lucy's first aim was to defeat herself. As her brain clouded over, as the memory of the views grew dim and the words of the book died away, she returned to her old shibboleth of nerves. She conquered her breakdown. Tampering with the truth, she forgot that the truth had ever been. Remembering that she was engaged to Cecil, she compelled herself to confused remembrances of George. He was nothing to her. He never had been anything. He had behaved abominably. She had never encouraged him. The armour of falsehood is subtly wrought out of darkness, and hides a man not only from others, but from his own soul. In a few moments Lucy was equipped for battle. "Something too awful has happened," she began, as soon as her cousin arrived. "Do you know anything about Miss Lavish's novel?" Miss Bartlett looked surprised, and said that she had not read the book, nor known that it was published. Eleanor was a reticent woman at heart. "There is a scene in it. The hero and heroine make love." "Do you know about that, dear? Do you know about it, please?" she repeated. "They are on a hillside, and Florence is in the distance." "My good Lucia, I am all at sea. I know nothing about it whatever." "There are violets. I cannot believe it is a coincidence. Charlotte, Charlotte, how could you have told her?" "I have thought before speaking. It must be you." "Told her what?" she asked with growing agitation. "About that dreadful afternoon in February." Miss Bartlett was genuinely moved. "Oh, Lucy, dearest girl, she hasn't put that in her book?" Lucy nodded. "Not so that one could recognize it, yes." "Then never, never, never more shall Eleanor Lavish be a friend of mine. So you did tell?" "I did just happen, when I had tea with her at Rome, in the course of conversation. But Charlotte, what about the promise you gave me when we were packing? Why did you tell Miss Lavish when you wouldn't even let me tell Mother? I will never forgive Eleanor. She has betrayed my confidence." "Why did you tell her, though? This is a most serious thing. Why does anyone tell anything?" The question is eternal, and it was not surprising that Miss Bartlett should only sigh faintly in response. She had done wrong. She admitted it. She only hoped that she had not done harm. She had told Eleanor in the strictest confidence. Lucy stamped with irritation. "Cecil happened to read out the passage aloud to me and to Mr. Emerson. It upset Mr. Emerson, and he insulted me again. Behind Cecil's back. Ugh, is it possible that men are such brutes? Behind Cecil's back as we were walking up the garden." Miss Bartlett burst into self-accusations and regrets. "What is to be done now? Can you tell me? Oh, Lucy, I shall never forgive myself, never to my dying day. Fancy if your prospects—" "I know," said Lucy, wincing at the word. "I see now why you wanted me to tell Cecil, and what you meant by some other source. You knew that you had told Miss Lavish, and that she was not reliable." It was Miss Bartlett's turn to wince. "However," said the girl, despising her cousin's shiftiness, "what's done's done. You have put me in a most awkward position. How am I to get out of it?" Miss Bartlett could not think. The days of her energy were over. She was a visitor, not a chaperone, and a discredited visitor at that. She stood with clasped hands while the girl worked herself into the necessary rage. That man must have such a setting down that he won't forget. And who's to give it him? I can't tell Mother now, owing to you. Nor Cecil, Charlotte, owing to you. I am caught up every way. I think I shall go mad. I have no one to help me. That's why I've sent for you. What's wanted is a man with a whip." Miss Bartlett agreed. One wanted a man with a whip. "Yes, but it's no good agreeing. What's to be done? We women go maundering on. What does a girl do when she comes across a cad? I always said he was a cad, dear. Give me credit for that at all events, from the very first moment when he said his father was having a bath. Oh, bother the credit, and who's been right or wrong. We've both made a muddle of it. George Emerson is still down the garden there, and is he to be left unpunished, or isn't he? I want to know." Miss Bartlett was absolutely helpless. Her own exposure had unnerved her, and thoughts were colliding painfully in her brain. She moved feebly to the window and tried to detect the cad's white flannels among the laurels. "You were ready enough at the Bertolini when you rushed me off to Rome. Can't you speak again to him now?" "Willingly would I move heaven and earth." "I want something more definite," said Lucy contemptuously. "Will you speak to him? It is the least you can do, surely, considering it all happened because you broke your word. Never again shall Eleanor Lavish be a friend of mine." Really, Charlotte was outdoing herself. "Yes or no, please, yes or no. It is the kind of thing that only a gentleman can settle." George Emerson was coming up the garden with a tennis ball in his hand. "Very well," said Lucy with an angry gesture. "No one will help me. I will speak to him myself." And immediately she realized that this was what her cousin had intended all along. "Hullo, Emerson," called Freddie from below. "Found the lost ball? Good man. Want any tea?" And there was an eruption from the house onto the terrace. "Oh, Lucy, but that is brave of you. I admire you." They had gathered round George, who beckoned, she felt, over the rubbish, the sloppy thoughts, the furtive yearnings that were beginning to cumber her soul. Her anger faded at the sight of him. The Emersons were fine people in their way. She had to subdue a rush in her blood before saying, "Freddie has taken him into the dining room. The others are going down the garden. Come. Let us get this over quickly. Come." "I want you in the room, of course." "Lucy, do you mind doing it? How can you ask such a ridiculous question?" Poor Lucy. She stretched out her hand. "I seem to bring nothing but misfortune wherever I go." Lucy nodded. She remembered their last evening at Florence, the packing, the candle, the shadow of Miss Bartlett's toque on the door. She was not to be trapped by pathos a second time. Eluding her cousin's caress, she led the way downstairs. "Try the jam," Freddie was saying. "The jam's jolly good." George, looking big and dishevelled, was pacing up and down the dining room. As she entered, he stopped and said, "No, nothing to eat." "You go down to the others," said Lucy. "Charlotte and I will give Mr. Emerson all he wants. Where's Mother?" She started on her Sunday writing. "She's in the drawing room." "That's all right, you go away." He went off singing. Lucy sat down at the table. Miss Bartlett, who was thoroughly frightened, took up a book and pretended to read. She would not be drawn into an elaborate speech. She just said, "I can't have it, Mr. Emerson. I cannot even talk to you. Go out of this house and never come into it again as long as I live here," flushing as she spoke and pointing to the door. "I hate a row. Go, please." "What? No discussion?" "But I can't." She shook her head. "Go, please." "I do not want to call in Mr. Vyse." "You don't mean," he said, absolutely ignoring Miss Bartlett, "you don't mean that you are going to marry that man?" The line was unexpected. She shrugged her shoulders, as if his vulgarity wearied her. "You are merely ridiculous," she said quietly. Then his words rose gravely over hers. You cannot live with vice. He's only for an acquaintance. He is for society and cultivated talk. He should know no one intimately, least of all a woman. It was a new light on Cecil's character. Have you ever talked to Vice without feeling tired? I can scarcely discuss. No, but have you ever? He is the sort who are all right, so long as they keep to things, books, pictures, but kill when they come to people. That's why I'll speak out through all this muddle even now. It's shocking enough to lose you in any case, but generally a man must deny himself joy, and I would have held back if your Cecil had been a different person. I would never have let myself go. But I saw him first in the National Gallery when he winced because my father mispronounced the names of great painters. Then he brings us here, and we find it is to play some silly trick on a kind neighbour. That is the man all over playing tricks on people, on the most sacred form of life that he can find. Next, I meet you together, and find him protecting and teaching you and your mother to be shocked, when it was for you to settle whether you were shocked or no. Cecil all over again. He daren't let a woman decide. He's the type who's kept Europe back for 1,000 years. Every moment of his life he's forming you, telling you what's charming or amusing or ladylike, telling you what a man thinks womanly, and you of all women, listen to his voice instead of to your own. So it was at the rectory, when I met you both again. So it has been the whole of this afternoon. Therefore I kissed you, because the book made me do that, and I wish to goodness I had more self-control. I'm not ashamed. I don't apologize. But it has frightened you, and you may not have noticed that I love you. Or would you have told me to go, and dealt with a tremendous thing so lightly? But therefore I settled to fight him. Lucy thought of a very good remark. You say Mr. Vyse wants me to listen to him, Mr. Emerson. Pardon me for suggesting that you have caught the habit. And he took the shoddy reproof and touched it into immortality. He said, Yes, I have, and sank down as if suddenly weary. I'm the same kind of brute at bottom. This desire to govern a woman, it lies very deep, and men and women must fight it together before they shall enter the garden. But I do love you surely in a better way than he does, he thought. Yes, really in a better way. I want you to have your own thoughts even when I hold you in my arms. He stretched them towards her. Lucy, be quick. There's no time for us to talk now. Come to me as you came in the spring, and afterwards I will be gentle and explain. I have cared for you since that man died. I cannot live without you. No good, I thought. She is marrying someone else, but I meet you again when all the world is glorious water and sun. As you came through the wood, I saw that nothing else mattered. I called. I wanted to live and have my chance of joy. And Mr. Vyse, said Lucy, who kept commendably calm. Does he not matter? That I love Cecil and shall be his wife shortly. A detail of no importance, I suppose. But he stretched his arms over the table towards her. May I ask what you intend to gain by this exhibition? He said. It is our last chance. I shall do all that I can. And as if he had done all else, he turned to Miss Bartlett, who sat like some portent against the skies of the evening. You wouldn't stop us this second time if you understood, he said. I have been into the dark, and I am going back into it, unless you will try to understand. Her long, narrow head drove backwards and forwards, as though demolishing some invisible obstacle. She did not answer. It is being young, he said quietly, picking up his racket from the floor and preparing to go. It is being certain that Lucy cares for me really. It is that love and youth matter intellectually. In silence the two women watched him. His last remark, they knew, was nonsense, but was he going after it or not? Would not he, the cad, the charlatan, attempt a more dramatic finish? No. He was apparently content. He left them, carefully closing the front door, and when they looked through the hall window, they saw him go up the drive and begin to climb the slopes of withered fern behind the house. Their tongues were loosed, and they burst into stealthy rejoicings. Oh, Lucia, come back here! Oh, what an awful man! Lucy had no reaction, at least, not yet. Well, he amuses me, she said. Either I'm mad or else he is, and I'm inclined to think it's the latter. One more fuss through with you, Charlotte. Many thanks. I think, though, that this is the last. my admirer will hardly trouble me again. And Miss Bartlett, too, essayed the roguish. Well, it isn't everyone who could boast such a conquest, dearest, is it? Oh, one oughtn't to laugh, really. It might have been very serious. But you were so sensible and brave, so unlike the girls of my day. Let's go down to them. But once in the open air she paused. Some emotion, pity, terror, love. But the emotion was strong, seized her, and she was aware of autumn. Summer was ending, and the evening brought her odours of decay, the more pathetic because they were reminiscent of spring. That something or other mattered intellectually. A leaf, violently agitated, danced past her, while other leaves lay motionless. That the earth was hastening to re-enter darkness, and the shadows of those trees over Windy Corner. Hullo, Lucy. There's still light enough for another set if you two'll hurry. Mr. Emerson has had to go. What a nuisance. That spoils the four. I say, Cecil, do play, do. There's a good chap. It's Freud's last day. Do play tennis with us, just this once. Cecil's voice came. My dear Freddie, I am no athlete. As you well remarked this very morning. There are some chaps who are no good for anything but books. I plead guilty to being such a chap, and will not inflict myself on you. The scales fell from Lucy's eyes. How had she stood Cecil for a moment? He was absolutely intolerable, and the same evening she broke off her engagement. Chapter 17. Lying to Cecil, he was bewildered. He had nothing to say. He was not even angry, but stood, with a glass of whisky between his hands, trying to think what had led her to such a conclusion. She had chosen the moment before bed, when, in accordance with their bourgeois habit, she always dispensed drinks to the men. Freddie and Mr. Floyd were sure to retire with their glasses, while Cecil invariably lingered, sipping at his while she locked up the sideboard. I am very sorry about it, she said. I have carefully thought things over. We are too different. I must ask you to release me, and try to forget that there ever was such a foolish girl. It was a suitable speech, but she was more angry than sorry, and her voice showed it. Different, how... I haven't had a really good education, for one thing, she continued, still on her knees by the sideboard. My Italian trip came too late, and I am forgetting all that I learnt there. I shall never be able to talk to your friends, or behave as a wife of yours should. I don't understand you. You aren't like yourself. You're tired, Lucy. Tired, she retorted, kindling at once. That is exactly like you. You always think women don't mean what they say. Well, you sound tired, as if something has worried you. What if I do? It doesn't prevent me from realizing the truth. I can't marry you, and you will thank me for saying so some day. You had that bad headache yesterday, all right. For she had exclaimed indignantly, I see it's much more than headaches, but give me a moment's time. He closed his eyes. You must excuse me if I say stupid things, but my brain has gone to pieces. Part of it lives 3 minutes back, when I was sure that you loved me, and the other part, I find it difficult. I am likely to say the wrong thing. It struck her that he was not behaving so badly, and her irritation increased. She again desired a struggle, not a discussion. To bring on the crisis, she said, There are days when one sees clearly, and this is one of them. Things must come to a breaking point sometime, and it happens to be today. If you want to know, quite a little thing decided me to speak to you when you wouldn't play tennis with Freddie. I never do play tennis, said Cecil, painfully bewildered. I never could play. I don't understand a word you say. You can play well enough to make up a 4. I thought it abominably selfish of you. No, I can't. Well, never mind the tennis. Why couldn't you have warned me if you felt anything wrong? You talked of our wedding at lunch, at least. You let me talk. I knew you wouldn't understand, said Lucy quite crossly. I might have known there would have been these dreadful explanations. Of course, it isn't the tennis. That was only the last straw to all I have been feeling for weeks. Surely it was better not to speak until I felt certain. She developed this position. Often before I have wondered if I was fitted for your wife, for instance, in London, and are you fitted to be my husband? I don't think so. You don't like Freddie, nor my mother. There was always a lot against our engagement, Cecil, but all our relations seemed pleased, and we met so often, and it was no good mentioning it until all things came to a point. They have today. I see clearly. I must speak, that's all. I cannot think you were right, said Cecil gently. I cannot tell why, but though all that you say sounds true, I feel that you are not treating me fairly. It's all too horrible. What's the good of a scene? No good. But surely I have a right to hear a little more. He put down his glass and opened the window. From where she knelt, jangling her keys, she could see a slit of darkness, and, peering into it, as if it would tell him that little more, his long, thoughtful face. Don't open the window, and you'd better draw the curtain too, Freddie, or anyone might be outside. He obeyed. I really think we had better go to bed if you don't mind. I shall only say things that will make me unhappy afterwards. As you say, it is all too horrible, and it is no good talking. But to Cecil, now that he was about to lose her, she seemed each moment more desirable. He looked at her, instead of through her, for the first time since they were engaged. From a Leonardo, she had become a living woman, with mysteries and forces of her own, with qualities that even eluded art. His brain recovered from the shock, and, in a burst of genuine devotion, he cried, "But I love you, and I did think you loved me." "I did not," she said. "I thought I did at first. I am sorry, and ought to have refused you this last time too." He began to walk up and down the room, and she grew more and more vexed at his dignified behaviour. She had counted on his being petty. It would have made things easier for her. By a cruel irony, she was drawing out all that was finest in his disposition. "You don't love me, evidently. I dare say you are right not to, but it would hurt a little less if I knew why." "Because," a phrase came to her, and she accepted it, "you're the sort who can't know anyone intimately." A horrified look came into his eyes. "I don't mean exactly that. But you will question me, though I beg you not to, and I must say something. It is that, more or less. When we were only acquaintances, you let me be myself, but now you're always protecting me." Her voice swelled. "I won't be protected. I will choose for myself what is ladylike and right. To shield me is an insult. Can't I be trusted to face the truth, but I must get it second-hand through you? A woman's place. You despise my mother. I know you do, because she's conventional and bothers over puddings, but, oh goodness!" She rose to her feet. "Conventional, Cecil. You're that, for you may understand beautiful things, but you don't know how to use them. And you wrap yourself up in art and books and music, and would try to wrap up me. I won't be stifled, not by the most glorious music, for people are more glorious, and you hide them from me. That's why I break off my engagement. You were all right as long as you kept to things, but when you came to people—" She stopped. There was a pause. Then Cecil said with great emotion, "It is true. True on the whole," she corrected, full of some vague shame. "True, every word. It is a revelation. It is I. Anyhow, those are my reasons for not being your wife," he repeated, "the sort that can know no one intimately. It is true. I fell to pieces the very first day we were engaged. I behaved like a cad to Bibi and to your brother. You are even greater than I thought." She withdrew a step. "I'm not going to worry you. You are far too good to me. I shall never forget your insight. And dear, I only blame you for this. You might have warned me in the early stages, before you felt you wouldn't marry me, and so have given me a chance to improve. I have never known you till this evening. I have just used you as a peg for my silly notions of what a woman should be. But this evening you are a different person. New thoughts, even a new voice." "What do you mean by a new voice?" she asked, seized with incontrollable anger. "I mean that a new person seems speaking through you," said he. Then she lost her balance. She cried, "If you think I am in love with someone else, you are very much mistaken." "Of course I don't think that. You are not that kind, Lucy." "Oh yes, you do think it. It's your old idea, the idea that has kept Europe back. I mean the idea that women are always thinking of men. If a girl breaks off her engagement, everyone says, 'Oh, she had someone else in her mind. She hopes to get someone else.' It's disgusting, brutal, as if a girl can't break it off for the sake of freedom." He answered reverently, "I may have said that in the past." "I shall never say it again. You have taught me better." She began to redden and pretended to examine the windows again. "Of course, there is no question of someone else in this, no jilting or any such nauseous stupidity. I beg your pardon most humbly if my words suggested that there was. I only meant that there was a force in you that I hadn't known of up till now." "All right, Cecil, that will do. Don't apologize to me. It was my mistake." "It is a question between ideals, yours and mine, pure abstract ideals, and yours are the nobler. I was bound up in the old vicious notions, and all the time you were splendid and new." His voice broke. "I must actually thank you for what you have done, for showing me what I really am. Solemnly, I thank you for showing me a true woman. Will you shake hands?" "Of course I will," said Lucy, twisting up her other hand in the curtains. "Good night, Cecil. Goodbye. That's all right. I'm sorry about it. Thank you very much for your gentleness. Let me light your candle, shall I?" They went into the hall. "Thank you. Good night again. God bless you, Lucy. Goodbye, Cecil." She watched him steal upstairs while the shadows from 3 banisters passed over her face like the beat of wings. On the landing he paused strong in his renunciation and gave her a look of memorable beauty. For all his culture, Cecil was an ascetic at heart, and nothing in his love became him like the leaving of it. She could never marry. In the tumult of her soul, that stood firm. Cecil believed in her. She must some day believe in herself. She must be one of the women whom she had praised so eloquently, who care for liberty and not for men. She must forget that George loved her, that George had been thinking through her and gained her this honourable release, that George had gone away in... what was it? The darkness. She put out the lamp. It did not do to think, nor, for the matter of that, to feel. She gave up trying to understand herself and joined the vast armies of the benighted who follow neither the heart nor the brain and march to their destiny by catchwords. The armies are full of pleasant and pious folk, but they have yielded to the only enemy that matters, the enemy within. They have sinned against passion and truth, and vain will be their strife after virtue. As the years pass, they are censured. Their pleasantry and their piety show cracks. Their wit becomes cynicism, their unselfishness hypocrisy. They feel and produce discomfort wherever they go. They have sinned against Eros and against Pallas Athene, and not by any heavenly intervention, but by the ordinary course of nature, those allied deities will be avenged. Lucy entered this army when she pretended to George that she did not love him, and pretended to Cecil that she loved no one. The night received her, as it had received Miss Bartlett 30 years before.